I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Once every year, Tom and I get to spend a little bit of time going through requests, maybe some throwbacks that we wanted to do, albums that stick out to us as either legendary or something that we feel we're a little bit undereducated on as far as musical canon and musical understanding of musical history, and we need to go back and review things. Now, this one happens to be really all of the above for both VIMTV as a whole. Paul Simon's Graceland. Now, Paul Simon, for those of you who don't know who Paul Simon is, it would be to your benefit to find that out. But Tom, our musical historian here at VIMTV, knows a lot about music history, and can give you guys a brief overview of who Paul Simon is.
Well, Paul Simon obviously started with Art Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel, put out a slew of very notable landmark albums, from Bookends to Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme to Bridge Over Troubled Water. I mean, they were iconic songwriters of the kind of Summer of Love era, from the the 60s into the early 70s. In the early 70s, they kind of parted ways. Paul Simon started going on more of a solo thing. He came out with his self-titled album, which I absolutely love. That's a personal favorite of mine, particularly for the acoustic guitar work.
Sure.
He kept coming out with albums. He won like back-to-back album of the years, pretty much. I mean, he just is a fantastic songwriter, and the reason that he gets away with the acclaim that he has is because he's in the pop genre, but there's so much more depth in his work. From a songwriting perspective, and especially from a lyrical perspective. This guy's lyrics are poetic, and they are deep, and they have a lot to tell you if you take the time to really look into them.
I mean, Paul Simon certainly shows what you can do with lyrics and how that adds to the listening experience. I mean, he's a living testament as to the power of lyrics and what they can do for your music.
Absolutely. Now, getting to Graceland, this album came out in 1986, which to me is one of the best years in music.
It was the year before I was born.
Dude, Master of Puppets, The Smiths' The Queen is Dead, Graceland, Beastie Boys' License to Ill. It was an important year in music, let's just say that. But what I love particularly...
the fact that you can just do that off the top of your head is impressive.
Hey man, that's why 1986 rocks, okay? Among many other reasons. But Graceland, the thing that I find so interesting about it is that Paul Simon, by the mid-'80s, was really an artist that didn't need another notch on his belt. He didn't. He already had done so much work with, Simon and Garfunkel. He had done so much awesome work with his solo career, Still Crazy After All These Years, and Self-Titled being two notable works for me. The album that came out before Graceland, Hearts and Bones, is a great album, but it was a little, I would say, underappreciated at the time that it was released. And I think that was kind of discouraging to Paul Simon.
Didn't get the sales that they expected it to.
Yeah, so he did a lot more kind of soul-searching. He recorded a good part of Graceland in South Africa, which really comes out a lot in the sound. And that's kind of what this album's about. It's about finding yourself. And I think it's about, as he details in the title track, a very kind of physical, literal pilgrimage, as much as an internal, metaphorical one. And I think that's what makes it so darn cool as an album. But really, when it comes to the music, I think that what this accomplishes is much more stylistic and artistic than it is even based in just plain old good songwriting.
Right. His aim here was not to create the best album of all time. His aim here was to try something new, to try new ideas, to make sounds that have never been heard before, and come up with these crazy songs that made you think differently about what music is, as a true artist should, really. And especially one who's been around the block, who's established, who has had several major albums. What better album, what better type of music could you make than music that just expands the minds of your listeners? And that's exactly what he tried to do.
Exactly, and that's what makes him so respectable as an artist. Because I mentioned I really like his self-titled album, and I love it for the acoustic guitar work. There's almost none of that on this album.
Right.
And he's just showing, you think that he's played all his cards, but he hadn't. And that is just so damn cool. One of our mutual favorite albums that we come back to and refer to all the time is Kid A.
Yes.
What Radiohead did with that album is they basically said, oh, we're really known as guitar gods in the rock genre. Let's ditch the electric guitar solos. Let's go all on songwriting and mood. And I think that, obviously many years before Kid A, that's kind of similarly what Paul Simon did with Graceland.
Right.
He said, oh, you know me as kind of an acoustic guitar singer-songwriter guy. He had obviously experimented a little bit still, but Graceland is where he really just abandons any preconception of what he was as an artist and goes in a different direction, but proves that he can still succeed.
From the start of this album, you put on the first track, The Boy in the Bubble, and really something that is used predominantly throughout this album is accordion. And The Boy in the Bubble, the first thing you hear is accordion, right?
Yeah.
And then that bass line comes in, that kind of like wonky ass bass line that it sounds like a MIDI keyboard, but it's probably not.
Yeah.
It's probably just some effect that he has on his bass, but it doesn't sound, it does this something about it. And I mentioned this to Tom, like I'm not sold on that song, but I can't help but think that damn, this is unique. Like you've never heard anything like The Boy in the Bubble. And obviously there's a lot of, the chorus is super catchy. It's a great chorus. The thing about Paul Simon is this guy knows how to write a solid vocal melody that you will not get out of your head. And most of these songs present that in different unique flavors. So you start off with The Boy in the Bubble and that kind of crazy song I was describing, but then it goes into the title track, Graceland. And there's something about this track that I think is truly special because here you have, whether it's the guitars or how he recorded it, as you mentioned, he recorded a good portion of this album in South Africa. Certainly Graceland has that vibe. However, he's also has like the drums make that country western sort of like that kind of just country western percussion that you expect. Your little march, kind of like you're riding a horse.
Kind of classic jump to like the 50s.
Yeah, but then it gets to the chorus and it cuts out and you just have this just absolutely mind-blowingly good guitar riff that just it just makes the song. And then Paul Simon just coolly, suavely, very calmly says, "I'm going to Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee," and it just like there's something about that just resonates with me because as Tom said, it's a pilgrimage to going back to your roots. And that track set those two tracks really in particular, the uniqueness of The Boy in the Bubble and then just the awesomeness that is Graceland set up the rest of the album for everything that you're going to hear. After that you hear I Know What I Know and Gumboats. Now you really like I Know What I Know.
Yeah.
These two tracks got a little bit away from melody. They're all about the ideas that are presented. They're rhythmic. They're both very rhythmic tracks, and with attention to detail on the beats that are presented there. But it's all about that rhythm, and not so much about melody. So I think that's why I just didn't prefer those. But then after that, you get just two killer tracks in Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, which has that island-esque kind of a cappella to start off with, and then it goes into it's a two-part song, and then You Can Call Me Out. Yeah,
which it's interesting. You mentioned the more focus on rhythmic elements in some of those because with Paul Simon's incorporation of the African music, there really are the two distinct sides of that because African music is very focused on rhythm.
Yeah, very much so.
But it is also very focused on harmony. It depends kind of on which part you want to pick out. I Know What I Know is one where he focuses more on the rhythm, and then the beginning of Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes with Lady Smith Black Mambazo is a little bit more, focused on that melody and harmony.
Right.
And so it's interesting how he decided to pull that all together. Another great 1986 album I forgot to mention earlier is Peter Gabriel's So. And this is the album that knocked that out of Album of the Year that year, which is pretty interesting to me. Maybe a little bit. I will say I like So a bit better than this album, but I certainly can't blame that decision. But it's just kind of interesting that those two artists were kind of blending those sounds, but they did it very differently.
Absolutely.
Because Paul Simon keeps to more of a pop format in the general sound while he is incorporating that world music. So it's kind of an interesting perspective because you still get his identity, but it's also part of something so much bigger. And similarly on the last track, All Around the World or Myth of Fingerprints, he has Los Lobos playing. And then he has his vocals on top, and so it's kind of an interesting amalgam of sounds.
And it's a cool way to close the album, honestly. Now, the only thing about this album that I can really critique is that there was just several tracks on here that didn't strike me to be, quite as strong as the rest of the album, and really almost to the point that there was a little bit of displacement. Now, I feel like this is a slightly minor complaint. Going back and reviewing classics like we are today, it's always hard because these albums historically are 100s. What they do for music. I mean, what Graceland has done as far as just the ideas it gave musicians. I mean, Tom, what does the track Crazy Love Volume 2 remind you of?
Vampire Weekend.
And why is that?
Because it sounds exactly like
Because Vampire Weekend is lifting their entire sound from Paul Simon,
It's
and
true.
that's absolutely okay. There really, as you pointed out before we turned the camera on, there's not a lot of bands out there going after Paul Simon's sound.
If you can do it and get away with it and be good at it, you might as well. That's what Vampire Weekend's doing.
I mean, they're definitely presenting it in a more modern form, but one thing you have to love is, Vampire Weekend also has that attention to lyrics. So clearly, Paul Simon has done something, even on Graceland, but throughout his work, that has inspired music from here on out. So historically, these are 100s. But at the same time, there are certain aspects about this album of why it wouldn't be a 100 for me if it came out today. I would go 88 on this.
Okay, I'm going to go 94. And
Which is a little bit of a difference. I mean, 6 points, but still, it's
and mostly what it comes down to is I know two of the key songs that you weren't too keen on, being I Know What I Know and Gumboots. I actually really like.
And I respect him as ideas. I just wish there was a little bit more melody. And maybe I'm just being overly picky.
I don't know, maybe. But one thing, I know this review is getting a little lengthy. I promise not to draw it out too much longer. But one thing I want to address is that a lot of people would think we are absolutely nuts for not going solid 100 on this. And that's absolutely fine. We're just trying to provide an honest perspective for you. To me, what it comes down to is tracks 9 and 10, Crazy Love Volume 2 and That Was Your Mother, I think are just slightly weaker. And I think that perfect albums can still have weaker tracks as long as they're contributing to the overall feel of the album. The example I would use is Nine Inch Nails' Downward Spiral, my favorite album of all time.
Agreed.
Big Man with a Gun. Not a great song on its own, but it's okay because in the flow of the album, if that wasn't there, then something would be missing.
I totally agree.
And so it contributes to the whole album listening experience. I don't feel like that's the way Graceland is set up. So when those two songs, I feel, don't live up to the songwriting quality individually, and I don't really feel like if you took them out, there would be an awkward flow, then I think that's a little bit unexcusable. And obviously, I'm sitting here poking at an absolute musical legend. I still love this album, but I'm just saying that's why I didn't give it a solid 100.
But historically given, it's a 100.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, 92 from us from Velocities?
91?
91 from us from Velocities and Music, now that I can do math on the fly. Paul Simon's Graceland. If you guys have listened to this album, we would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, aspirations, what this album, like what you've taken from it. I mean, I know we didn't go too deep into the lyrics. Obviously, lyrics are huge in this album, and Paul Simon in general is a lyric god. So if you guys have favorite Paul Simon lyrics, we'd love to hear them. www.velocitiesmusic.com, youtube.com/velocitiesmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, let us know what albums you'd like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
A man walks down the street, he says, why am I soft in the middle now? Why am I soft in the middle? The rest of my life is so hard, I need a photo.